Welcome everyone. As you're logging in, we're going live. You're here at the YANA monthly town hall, which used to be at the Yale Club, but we're now doing these virtual. And we'll just give everybody a few minutes. This program is being recorded. We will supply, as we usually do after the program, a nice cleaned up version that will also be available on our YouTube channel. And we also supply resources and other links and things that you may find of useful information for afterwards. So we're gonna get started. So welcome everyone. Today's discussion is about social impact in New Haven. As we said in the invitation, even though we spent many years, whether as an undergraduate or a graduate student at Yale, that New Haven is the second largest city in Connecticut. And maybe some of us have been back there frequently. Some of us go back only for reunions or never at all. And tonight we've got some folks who have made New Haven their home. There is a tremendous business entrepreneur network there, community investing, art, biking, all sorts of things going on. We've discovered in some of our previous programs some of the kinds of direct financial and economic investment that's been going on in New Haven. And tonight we're going to be talking about the human capital investment. And we're going to hear a little bit about how these individuals, our alumni, came to New Haven, came maybe back and forth, and came to stay. None of them, I should say, are actually from New Haven, but they've really dedicated most of their professional lives since graduating from Yale to improving the Elm City and the lives of its residents. So I want to start a little bit with each person's background and get to know our great alumni panelists here. So Patricia, I want to start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to New Haven, then you went away, and then what made you come back and stay?
Okay, so I came as an undergrad in, it's gonna be a long time ago, 1977. I think some people were not born, but that's, so I came as, an undergrad. I was recruited for field hockey and lacrosse, ended up, doing track, graduated, actually went, trained for many years. I trained for 10 years, as a sort of an amateur athlete. Came back to here, actually to New Haven and trained. But then I left and launched my career after I retired. And I was coming back and forth. I, had very strong ties to the athletic department. So I was coming back doing a number of different things. And then, one day I came back one weekend for a friend whose daughter was getting married. I was living in Indiana, and, Indiana isn't quite walkable. And I was walking around the city and I said, oh my God, New Haven has really changed. I could walk everywhere. There was just this vibrancy. And I said, I think I could actually live here. So, I really moved back here to actually be more involved as an alum with the university. Mm-hmm. And through that is really how I sort of stumbled onto New Haven Promise.
Now you came from Cleveland, Ohio, right? You're not.
Yes, but I was in boarding school. I was in boarding school in Concord, Mass. Yes.
How do you find being in New Haven as a resident versus what you remember being there as a student?
Oh, well, even though I lived off campus for 2 years, it was still in the Yale bubble, which was right around the university. Sure. I think I lived on Edward Street and Mansfield Street. So, I really wasn't out of the bubble in any significant way. But when I came back to training for the Olympic trials, I was not actually, no, I was living in the city, but still not really involved in the city because I, very narrowly focused. So since I've been back with New Haven Promise, it's completely different. I am a resident of the city. I live in Worcester Square. It's a very different perspective. So it's really great to get to know the city.
That's awesome. And we're going to get back to talk about the organization itself and kind of what you've done there and what that's all about. But let's get a little background because Caroline and Margaret, neither of you from the East Coast either. Are you both from Kentucky? And did you know each other? Is that what I learned?
Yeah, exactly. We actually didn't know each other, but we both are originally from Kentucky, which is really special. We're also both Korean American. Margaret's full Korean, I'm half Korean, and then we both graduated the same year at Yale, class of 2014. So we have some eerie similarities, which is really fun and special. But yeah, a little bit about my background. I born and raised in Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky, and then came here for undergrad in 2010. So I've been in New Haven for about coming on 11, 12 or so years. Did a lot of different activities while I was in undergrad. I was a foot leader the first year, sort of outdoor orientation trips, and did a lot of student government. But I think what was the most formative part of undergrad for me was getting to know New Haven and falling in love with New Haven. I got really lucky to spend a lot of my summers here, worked for the mayor's office, just got to experience summer session here and just really experience the city. And I think there's a couple reasons why I was so attracted to New Haven so fast. I think one, and maybe Patricia, as you're such an amazing athlete, this might connect with you. I think growing up, I had been part of a lot of sports teams, and why I was so attracted to sports was because it was a really strong, concrete feeling of being a part of something bigger than yourself. And I think I felt that in such a strong way as soon as I came to New Haven. I think it was one of the first times I was living right nested within a city where I could walk down the street and there's so many different restaurants. I just felt really, really connected really fast in the same ways I did when I played basketball and ran track. And then I think I just fell in love here. I fell in love with someone here. I built a lot of friendships here, outside of the university while in undergrad. And I think, that, what happens when you fall in love with a place is you feel tied to it. You feel a sense of stake in the city and its future, and its future became my future. And I just got lucky enough to be able to stay here. It was such a given to me that this was the place I wanted to land after I graduated, and just got so lucky to be able to. And it's just really special to have been here for the time that I have been. And like there are meetings sometimes that we have with Collab, and we'll talk more about Collab later, where I meet with someone, I'm like, I've known you since I was 17 years old, because I worked for the mayor's office, for example, or I have mentors, that I first talked to when I was a sophomore. And I think that longevity is very, very special to me in this city.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Margaret, tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other than you came from Kentucky, and whereabouts?
Yeah, I also came from Kentucky, although I've also lived in South Korea. I've lived in California, and sort of moved around a lot as a kid, and was lucky enough to get to Yale, same class as Caroline. And for me, my story is a little different in that I didn't spend my 4 years while at school really deeply engaging with the New Haven community. I was involved in a bunch of stuff, but not necessarily sort of New Haven facing programs or projects. And I think it really hindered my experience. I think it changed, looking back now, I think if I could change my experience, I would have engaged with the city a lot more in a thoughtful way. The way that I did land here, though, is I started working with the Sci Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale, which is used to be called the Yale Entrepreneurial Institute. So it was like running a lot of like student faculty entrepreneurship programming. And that's when I really got to know New Haven and really, really fell in love with it. And I think it's built around just the relationships that I started to form. It's just such an incredibly vibrant city. So many amazing people, community leaders and activists who are like really willing to fight for the city and really willing to fight for a vision of true sort of community wealth, community well-being. And I was just so inspired by that, and just kind of diving deep into this like medium-sized city where I felt like there was just so much going on. And so I think, I stayed because of entrepreneurship, but I've been here for over 10 years because of the relationships that I've built. Reflecting back, kind of like what Caroline was saying about the individual people, I think it's wild to me that, all of my 20s have been spent just meeting hundreds of people in the city. And they're my friends, they're my mentors, they're my advisors. And yeah, it's cool to feel so rooted in the city, especially as I mentioned, as somebody who's moved around a lot. And in my life, I've lived in this city the longest out of any other city. And that's pretty cool. And I feel really, really lucky to be here.
That's great. These are just, you know, it makes me want to go back and kind of walk off campus and see all these other places, and interesting to see. I mean, Patricia, you're a little bit older than I am, but like what changed from the 80s to now, we can get a whole discussion about how things have changed both in New Haven and at Yale. But let's get into your organizations a little bit, because that's kind of why we're here. Now, one of the common theme I would say is that your two organizations focus on, I would say, access, right? Access to education, higher education, and then for Collab, access to mentorship, entrepreneurship opportunities, jobs, resources, mentoring, all that kind of stuff. So maybe, you know, tell us about your particular organization, and then, you know, how does the access concept work into what you do? And if I've totally characterized some of your main mission, what you do, please go ahead and correct me. So Patricia, let's talk a little bit about New Haven Promise, please.
Okay, so New Haven Promise was started 10 years ago. Really, it was kind of the brainchild. It's a program, a promise program that uses education to really create opportunity. So at the heart, it's an economic development program. How do we do that? We do that by investing in talent with a tuition benefit for students who graduate from public schools as well as charter schools, which are, as you know, are public schools, for families that stay in the city and send their children to New Haven public schools. If they do that, the student gets to be average, does 40 hours of community service. I believe we're the only promise program that requires some sweat equity here of students to give to the city. If they do that and meet our requirements, they will receive a tuition benefit. So with that, that allows them to go to college. And many of our students actually come out debt-free, believe it or not, in this age, which is just fantastic. But, you know, in the beginning, our program was really outward facing with the scholarship component. But again, since it's an economic development, it's really actually a full comprehensive program. We had 3 pillars: college access, college success. So when students go into college, we're developing them through the years, and then career and civic launch. And so many people know the scholarship component, but they don't know the other 2 components. So we follow students over from the time they're about 14 until, well, we're still following our scholars, helping them to navigate through their careers. Access, absolutely. Our program is all about giving students, through this investment with tuition in college, the tools to really be able to live their best lives in the city. And we do that through a very strong internship and career launch programming that starts sophomore year and takes them through the first couple of years of employment in the city.
About what percentage of the New Haven Promise kids come back and stay and settle in New Haven? Do they stay after college, and do they start their careers there, or they kind of go
well
places?
Yeah, many of them do end up staying in the region, and because we structured the program so that the tuition benefit is really for Connecticut colleges, public colleges and private colleges. So we keep students in the state. That's really intentional because you know, really it's about building that next generation, breaking intergenerational poverty. And you know, I should go back a little bit to say that, you know, when we were at Yale, the #1 employer was Winchester Gun Factory. But now the #1 employer in New Haven is Yale, and the #2 is Yale New Haven Hospital. So Promise was really focused on a need that came out of the city for a workforce that would have the skills necessary for really more of a knowledge economy. And so, you know, again, not many people sort of know that. We will be doing a better job kind of, you know, now that we fully developed the program out in all these different aspects, you know, this sort of comprehensive approach we'll be, messaging and branding that a bit more.
No, that's great to know. And this is a nice segue. Caroline and Margaret, have you met any New Haven Promise students through Collab? Just curious, or do you ever send do you let people, do you guys know each other in your ecosystems in New Haven?
Yes.
We definitely know each other. Yeah, I feel like a couple things come up. I mean, one, I think I've been volunteering at the New Haven Promise Scholar graduation celebration. I don't know, Patricia, for how many years? For a long,
I mean, I don't know, the whole time I've been back here, which has been 8 years.
Exactly. So, yeah, I feel really connected to New Haven Promise. And so, I mean, New Haven Promise is always a beacon for us of an organization that we think is doing just impressive, like foundational work, especially with Patricia's leadership. And I feel just always so honored to be a part of it, even just in a very small way through volunteering at the graduation. And I think what I think is sort of what ties, I think, the premise of New Haven Promise in us, I think is a fundamental belief in the talent that already exists in Connecticut, the young people, the residents who are right here, right now, who have, I think in our case, brilliant ideas, and this includes the scholars, to impact their communities and neighborhoods. And that's really the heart and mission of Collab, to provide entrepreneurs, individuals with impactful, rigorous business support using a really compassionate, fundamentally heart-centered approach so that they can build good businesses, really create economic power, and, as leaders, really shape their communities that for so many of them they grew up in. And we prioritize serving people of color and women, particularly Black and Latinx entrepreneurs who face persistent and significant barriers to entrepreneurship because of racism and sexism. And yeah, I mean, I'll let Margaret talk a little bit maybe about our story, because that's where we're at.
Tell us a little bit. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail that. So talk, because if I just say Collab, people will be like, what is that? I mean, educational access, people can kind of understand, but tell us about where this thing is, how you developed it.
Definitely. So that's kind of the overall mission, but I'll let Margaret touch a little bit on kind of like how we got there, and then maybe a bit about our model as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been building inclusive entrepreneurship supports here in New Haven for our community of entrepreneurs since 2017. And the way that we started was sort of throughout the years of, I'll say about 2015 to 2017, before launching the organization, we just talked to and built relationships with a lot of different people, stakeholders, community organizations, and entrepreneurs, and really asked the question of what's working right now at that time in this entrepreneurial support ecosystem, right? Like, why hadn't certain entrepreneurs access resources? Who was getting funding? Who wasn't? What was standing in the way? And so based on a lot of those learnings and sort of driven by a desire to support people who are becoming more and more, our friends, definitely our neighbors and different community members, build those ideas out, we founded Collab. And we were kind of able to combine my experience sort of at Yale, like helping student faculty ventures get started, and Caroline's sort of experience here in New Haven. And we both were working at a tech company and things like that. And so we just started to put all those pieces together, and really built in access and inclusion at the heart of what we were doing, and not sort of as a nice to have. And you can kind of see that in the way that we approach our work and what we see as our model. So, we have a sort of a 3-pillared model for reaching and training and empowering and co-learning with our entrepreneurs. The first is equity and access. So, entrepreneurship is a very sort of specific path. It's an inaccessible path for a lot of different people. It requires a lot out of you emotionally, financially, logistically, psychologically. And so there's a lot of barriers that stand in the way, especially for Black and Latinx folks, especially for women. And so we sort of employ a neighborhood or community organization-based approach to outreach, first and foremost, to just ensure that folks know about the work that we do. We work with different community groups like management teams, the library system, other nonprofits, individual community leaders, et cetera, to just kind of touch as many people as possible. And we do sort of specific events in the different communities, and also have sort of a 30-minute coaching program where anybody open to the public, no application, can kind of just sign up and talk to us and get connected to us. And as a part of our programming, we also provide things like childcare or transportation or interpretation services to make sure that anybody can sort of be successful second pillar is what we call high touch programming. We spend a lot of human hours just for each venture in our flagship program. We combine entrepreneurship education and business education with that heart-based leadership development work. And we also provide one-on-one coaching in our flagship, which is a 12-week program. And so, you know, we try to keep up with the latest in terms of entrepreneurship programming and try to deliver really, really high quality sort of services for our entrepreneurs. And then the last pillar is comprehensive support. Caroline mentioned this, entrepreneurship is very hard. It takes a lot, it takes a village, it takes funders, it takes lawyers, it takes accountants, and then it's mentors, advisors, and all sorts of people. And so we really try to replicate that for our entrepreneurs, you know, and bring together a network of folks to the table to really, as a village, as a city, support the entrepreneurs that are going through our program.
Excellent. Thank you. This is just a beautiful outline of all the kinds of stuff that's going on. You guys are highlighting all these wonderful aspects of life in New Haven, and particularly what you guys have done. I wonder if I can make this a little bit of a storytelling. So Patricia, you've been at New Haven Promise now for almost 10 years. Do you remember a particular challenge, and it could be, you know, with your organization or with yourself dealing with something, you know, and maybe also something really memorable that inspired you, a really good story about a student, how you overcame something. This is just a little chance to share some little anecdotes and stories about your work and about maybe the people you work with at New Haven Promise.
Well, we actually have a lot of stories. I would say that, let me think here, a story.
Could be with a student. You could think about it if you want to come back. It could be like a particular challenge.
I'll come back, yes.
Okay, we can come back.
Yes, okay.
Good. No, you have one? Do you want to start with one?
No. I am going to, but
right,
why don't you let them go first? Because I need to think about it. I have so many
Caroline and
stories.
Margaret. Okay, perfect. Think of one. So Caroline and Margaret, like, give us a story. Either it was like an incredible challenge. It could be anything from you thought your business was going to fall apart, or some of your first students were going to fall apart, or like this brilliant, inspirational, funny something that happened. It could be you. It could be, you know, any of your people you've come in contact with.
Yeah, I can give it a try. So I think we're really proud to have been one of the, if not, I think one of the first accelerators in the state, and one of the first accelerators in New Haven. And again, as Margaret said, sort of 2015, 2017, when we were getting going. Of course, you know, as Patricia can probably really, this probably resonates with you, being sort of one of the first also comes with its challenges. I think one challenge we ran up against when we were first starting was sometimes folks because we had a lot of different conversations with a lot of different stakeholders, and sometimes folks asked, but are there good ideas? Like, are there good ideas in the city? And of course, the very premise and heart of why we do Collab is because we have a fundamental belief that any individual, if they have that drive and desire, can come up with a good idea that impacts themselves and the communities that they know and love. And so I think that was, something that was surprising to us to run up against. And I'm really proud of us for believing so fully in the city and its capacity, for coming up with brilliance, for being brilliant, for always being brilliant for generations. And for just helping to provide some supports to be able to take those brilliant ideas and take it to the next step. And I think that bleeds into, what success looks like, or at least a small story of successes. You know, now after 4 years of doing this, being a part of an ecosystem of other entrepreneur support organizations that are popping up and doing incredible work, we don't hear that anymore. I don't hear that question of people doubting whether or not good ideas exist. That's not a question that comes up. If anything, there's a tremendous amount of investment in entrepreneurial activity, in small businesses. And I think that's really, really exciting. And I'm proud of us for contributing even just in a small way in that perception shift of what's possible and the different ideas that are here.
Beautiful. Margaret, you want to add to that? success? Oh, I'll come back to you in a second, Patricia. Mark,
Okay.
you want to add, like either through Collab or challenge or particularly good
Yeah.
success stories you're proud of?
Mm-hmm. You know, like Patricia, there's so many.
You want to
But
think, and I
one
can go
that
Patricia.
comes to mind. No, sorry.
You got it? Okay.
Just that way back when, I don't remember what year, Caroline, you might remember, it was like very early on in our journey with Collab, and we had begun working with entrepreneurs, and one of our entrepreneurs was this incredible sort of New Haven native who was really excited about his business, and you know, he's dynamic, passionate, and amazing. And we, you know, worked with him in the program, and we had this private investor who was interested in just New Haven businesses, and he was specifically interested in folks who, you know, were born and raised here, who were rooted here. And we were so excited about making this connection, like, wow, what a fit, you know, this entrepreneur, this investor, let's like make that happen. And so we set up a meeting, and we thought it went fine. Like, it was good, you know, they had a good conversation, and they sort of promised to keep in touch, and they exchanged information, and, you know, good conversation. Maybe a week later, that entrepreneur just came back to us and said, like, hey, like, I wanted to share some feedback about how that felt for me. And he shared with us sort of his experience moving through a city that he's known his entire life, going into a high-rise in downtown New Haven that he had never been into, going up the elevator into this man's office to sort of have this experience sort of across the table, like him on that side, me on this side, him sort of asking him these business questions. And of course, this investor was trying to do his due diligence, was very kind, very polite. But I think for him, the entrepreneur that we were working with, he just wanted to tell us that, hey, that was hard for me, you know, given my background, given my relationship with this city and with the wealth in this city, and how I felt just moving and growing in this city, you know, that was a difficult experience. And he shared that with us with the hopes that we would think about that. And it really spurred a pretty serious conversation for us, and changed how we view our role. Like, our role is not simply to make connections, right? Our role is to have conversations on both sides of the table, both preparing entrepreneurs for specific kinds of experiences, conversations, pitches, what have you, for sure, making sure they feel equipped. That's absolutely our role, and we were doing that at that point. But what we weren't doing was having conversations on the other side, talking to the folks on the investor side, or talking to the folks on sort of the centers of power or wealth, and saying, like, hey, how can we also change you all or adapt together so that these relationships feel more equitable, feel more mutual, bilateral, et cetera. And so that was a challenging moment, but one that eventually, you know, really propelled us forward, made us way more mature in how we handled those connections, and created sort of a system for how we would do that better in the future. And also just, I think, made us think differently about power dynamics, and made us think differently about access. That access doesn't just mean you make a connection and you're done, right? Access it can be cultural, it can be relational, right? It can be emotional. And I think that was a really great learning for us very early in our journey, that I think has shaped the way that we approach this work and approach how we support our entrepreneurs. And the other way that it was a success was that we had built this relationship with this entrepreneur that he felt comfortable sharing that with us. And he trusted us enough to give us that feedback. And he gave us this gift of improving how we do our work. And ever since then, thanks to that experience, you know, we've never been the same, right? And so that was a huge gift that he gave us. And, you know, part of the heart ethos work and sort of the deeply relational work we try to do with our entrepreneurs, I think that was a moment in which a challenge actually really shined through as a success because of that relationship that we had built with him specifically. And so that's a story that comes up. Definitely, you know, ultimately a good story, but challenging for sure, and a true learning experience. I think I can speak for both me and Caroline when that happened.
No, that's great. It sounds like a great learning. And how did the conversations go from there forward with the investor sides? Did you find people were very receptive to kind of whatever it was you were sort of changing, say this is how we really need to be doing it and thinking it? Did you have some people that just weren't getting it, or people generally really genuinely interested in wanting to learn and do it the right way?
Yeah, I think people are generally willing, right? I think folks are willing to go there. And that's something that we've really seen here in New Haven with the ecosystem of different supports that exist here. I think we're, as a city, really ready to have some of these difficult conversations about how we really show up for our people. And yeah, we saw that then and now. You know, one of the projects that Caroline and I work on is at an ecosystem level, to sort of trying to coordinate all of the different resources that exist for entrepreneurs and making sure that we're all on the same page about what our values are, how we approach this work. You know, when we say we want to invest in Black and Brown businesses, what do we mean by that? How do we want to be as support organizations or funders? So that's been a big part of the conversations we've been having recently based, you know, from that project. And so it's kind of manifested in big and small ways since then, kind of culminating, I think, in this like pretty big effort to coordinate the ecosystem. And yeah, it's been encouraging.
That's great. That's great. All right, Patricia, now you've got a good, tell us, challenge, successes. What are some, you must have, I mean, I can imagine the number of kids that have come through the program. So please go ahead.
Right. Well, I would say this story is going to be maybe a lot like some of the things that Caroline touched upon. One of the things that I've run into over and over, which is, you know, it's not the best, is just this perception that there is a lack of talent, a lack of giftedness here in the city, in the local population. And one of the things that it became very clear to me that we really needed to do was, you know, it wasn't enough to send kids to college, but given that, you know, over half our students are first generation of college, and probably 70% have family incomes under 60,000, and half of those under 30,000, which, you know, that's just straight poverty. But I sit on the Chamber of Commerce board, and this isn't to call out the chamber. Chamber is really a great partner. But one of the things that I hear over and over from businesses, and, you know, just the rhetoric in the state that, frankly, I don't think is true, is that all the talent is leaving the state. Now, I find that very interesting because, in fact, all of our talent is staying in the state, in the region, in New Haven. And it's very clear to me that there is a disconnect between the business community and the actual talent that, you know, New Haven's public schools, both charter and traditional public schools, are pumping out. You know, we fund about 800 kids. We give, you know, we disperse we're up to about $4.4 million a year. That's a year, and it's, you know, and it's going up. So that's a lot of talent being developed. And so I will say, how does that manifest itself? You know, it manifests itself. I can give you an example of one particular scholar who, and our scholars they are committed to New Haven. They know they have a dynamic city. They don't need to go to Boston or New York. They have everything that they need right here. They have Collab. They have, you know, so many things going on right here. And so this particular scholar, you know, got an internship, and before pre-COVID, we were placing kids in about 200 paid internships. And, you know, that's about, maybe a fourth of our kids. So, you know, that's a lot of talent for businesses, for nonprofits, for the city in general. This particular student, because of Promise, was able to come out with very little debt. He went to work at one of the businesses here, and, you know, he decided, you know, this is what was great. You know, he was able to connect in broaden his network. We have a business council that, you know, has several businesses on it. And he was able to make a connection to one of the businesses, which was one of the, you know, smaller law firms. And in this, you know, this person was able to guide him through a couple of different steps. I'm sorry, that's my dog who was trying to say that she's hungry. So she will stop barking. That's her talking. But anyway, you know, he ended up buying a 3-family home. So because of that mentorship and because he had very little debt and he was able to live at home and save up his money, he was able at 27 to buy a 3-family home, of which one of our scholars, actually the one who works in my office, Jorge, who has been working with me and with Promise, you know, for the last, you know, 6 years, she is a tenant. So, you know, we are building, you know, our scholars know their agency in this city, you know, and so they're starting to use that agency and use that network and realize their power collectively and individually. So it's really wonderful. And Jorge, who is a mother, her son became our youngest pledge when he was born because she signed him up when he was 2 days old. So those are kind of, you know, some of the incredible stories that are kind of unfolding in the city around, you know, what does it look like when an entire city embraces its young people to college, through college, and then brings them back. They don't actually go away. That's the old model where a lot of talent in under-resourced neighborhoods were taken away. And nothing, there was no connection, there was no development, there was no relationship. You know, that's me. I left Cleveland, and I left Cleveland because I couldn't get what I needed to develop in Cleveland. And now I'm here as opposed to in Cleveland, which certainly Cleveland could use my talents, but I had no connection there. So what we do is we take our talent and we develop them, the relationship with the city. They love the city, and they are going to be, I mean, they are learning how to be leaders. We never lose that connection, ever. And we don't want to give up our young people to Boston, to New York. We want to use their talents here. And I think Promise is the platform that allows that to happen.
Beautiful. I love that. I want a couple of questions coming in, but I want to talk about, let's think about like the role of Yale, let's say, because you've told now that's the biggest employer. So I'd be curious to know, obviously it was started, I know that, I'm just blanking on the previous, Levin, was that right? He was on the board that started the organization.
Rick Levin, yes. And Peter Salovey is the chair of our board.
Now, right. So like, what's the relationship between Yale and the organization, and maybe even just Yale and the public school student body? Like, what do they think of it, the ones that you see coming in? Just what is that relationship? Because if you don't, if you're not working, if you're, it's so easy to live in that bubble and have no idea what's going on in New Haven. And I have no idea what New Haven thinks about, you know, and not everybody's different kind of opinions, but have you seen that relationship change, and how important is it now? And
absolutely, absolutely. And you know how it's changed? It's changed with New Haven Promise, because that first year in 2012, I came in August, and you know, that was like the 3rd class going into college. So when we, you know, fast forward to the next summer, you know, I was just like, what's happening with our scholars? They were coming home. They really didn't know what they should be doing, like building their resume, getting internships, you know, building towards that entry-level job. They really didn't know what they were supposed to be doing. So we ended up partnering with Yale, who at the time started a New Haven hiring initiative. And so we partner. In fact, today was the 2 intern orientations for the students who are doing internships at Yale. So we have a whole jobs pipeline. Pre-COVID, we were placing 100 students in paid internships all throughout departments at Yale. And because of that, really the university, just about every part, every nook and cranny of the university absolutely knows what, New Haven Promise. They have had a New Haven Promise intern, and now these students are being employed. And what was the beauty of it is, most of the workers at Yale from the community are probably in the dining halls and in the janitorial. But the students that we're doing, these are going to go into management and professional and management ranks. And so this is really how Yale sees its investment in really building a middle class and broadening the middle class that's here in terms of the local population. So we, like I said, that to, through, and back, that whole internship component part and career launch is, it's a very strong part of our program. We place a lot of kids over at Yale New Haven Hospital, which is the #2 employer, school, it just doesn't matter. And we have that talent. That talent is very deep. And so, that relationship with Yale, what's really interesting is so many of the kids and their parents used to walk past the gates at Yale with no access. Now they have a Yale ID. They're getting paid by Yale. They're getting hired. Promise is really it is a part of Yale, but we're independent from Yale. So a lot of folks say, well, are you a part of Yale department? No, we're not. Are you a part of the city? No, we're not. Are you a part of the school? No, we're not. We're a nonprofit. We're independent. And I think that independence is critical for us to do the things that we really want to do for the population that we serve.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. And so, Carolyn and Margaret, now that we know that Yale and Yale New Haven are the biggest employers in the city, how is it to operate with entrepreneurs? Do they have any connection to those big employers, or are they filling all these other spaces? Like, what is it like, and what's the relationship between what you're doing and the entrepreneurs in Yale?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a lot of opportunity on a sort of a number of different pillars. I think one, there's a really exciting opportunity in terms of sourcing and procurement. We have a lot of local entrepreneurs who are producing amazing items or products or services. And I think it'd be exciting to explore what connective tissue between sort of the services that Yale may need or the hospital may need, and how local entrepreneurs can support that. So I think that'd be really exciting to invest in. I think the city of New Haven has been exploring certain initiatives around that. And we'd be excited to be involved in that. I think it's also interesting to think about the sort of university or campus as a place for space and retail. They have spaces that are open. I'm thinking about, a recent food business accelerator grad that is a cupcake cocktail bar, Je T'aime. They're fantastic, just two really amazing entrepreneurs, and I can imagine them in a number of different places on campus. That could be really, really exciting. Sort of mutual spaces for students and residents to be able to hang out and spend time together. And then I think university as sort of a partner and educator. I think about sort of our connections with Sci-City. I mean, obviously Margaret, we used to work there a few years back, but we have a great relationship with Sci-City, sort of the current sort of entrepreneurship hub within Yale, and different. I recently, someone who I think either works there or is really connected there, sent us their sort of financial modeling storytelling series, and we sent that around to our entrepreneurs. So being able to have sort of connected tissue between entrepreneurs and different educational resources within the university is really valuable. That's obviously not comprehensive, but those are a few, I think, exciting ways that the university and campus can help support local entrepreneurs in really tremendous ways.
Margaret, do you want to add to that?
Well, I think that was really well said. I think the only other way in which our work is relevant to Yale is just jobs. Like, if we can help create a base of community-rooted jobs that outside of Yale, that could be exciting for New Haven, right? If more businesses, small businesses, restaurants, big businesses, growth businesses, what have you, are rooted here in New Haven because of our work and the work of our amazing ecosystem of entrepreneurship support organizations. That is a win, right? And just more jobs and more well-paid jobs for New Haven residents that don't have to work at Yale to have that.
Got it. Thank you. I want to sort of start to think future as we kind of wind this conversation down. So let's start with Patricia. Like, what are your goals for New Haven Promise, and then also for the city of New Haven? If you could, wave a wand or really build towards, what would that look like for you?
Well, I would say that, it's really interesting. There was actually a very troubling report that came out that talked about millennials, and the good news was that white millennials were, had sort of made up the gap. When the economy crashed, back in when it crashed, 4 or 5 years ago, but that the job market was not great. What was going to happen with millennials? But it turns out that white millennials really actually did quite well. Many of their parents helped them to buy homes. They were able to leverage their resources and networks to practically make up and almost catch up to where other generations were that launched, out of college. But Black millennials were, so the different wealth generation between white millennials and Black millennials. White millennials sort of wealth generation was around 88,000, and Black millennials were going backwards at 5,000. Now that's a pretty disturbing statistic. And so, as we think about where our work is, it is important to help our scholars to launch, but we really need to help them to build wealth. And so, what we're looking at are the things that we can help them to launch, and creating, really an entire core where scholars can come to us and learn how to do any number of things, whether it's they want to launch a business. Of course, we'd send them over to Collab, but we probably work with them first and then send them over to Collab. Whether they want to go work for Yale for 5 years, buy a home because they can go through the home buyer program, and because they're coming out with zero debt, they can start to build wealth. They can sort of have the job and build wealth, because I think one of the things that we've seen is that here, just in the pandemic, what we've seen is, those folks who diversify from not just, having a job, and so many people lost their job, but actually having wealth that was able to sustain them through this pandemic. And for communities of color and low income communities, they did not have that cushion. So we actually have an opportunity to build an entire generation that is not only launching their careers, but actually building wealth from the moment they come out of college. And that's really important. And so our work is going to be focused on, leadership, building competencies that have to do with work and wealth building. The two really go together.
Got it. Beautiful. I like that. Okay, good. So let's go Collab. Like, goals for your organization, goals for the city.
Yeah.
What do you say?
I could start by sort of exploring the latter part about sort of goals for the city. I think it's funny, this question recently came up because I was part of a town hall on the American Rescue Plan, which, as a result of the American Rescue Plan, New Haven's getting $95 million, which is really a catalytic investment that could lead to really long-term sustained change. And the conversation was about, all right, how do we want to decide how to, as a city, use this $95 million? And I think something that came up for me is that investment a real opportunity to invest in infrastructure around collective decision-making? And how can there really be sort of community leadership in decision-making in the city? Because, something that we will never not have is decisions to be made. And could this be a moment to really invest in infrastructure around access to being able to collectively make those decisions? So you know, that obviously touches a lot of different things, whether it's language access. You know, Spanish and Arabic are the two primary languages that are spoken in New Haven. Could we have more language access to community meetings? Broadband infrastructure comes up. Digital divide obviously has become very real and very concrete. It always has been, but especially during COVID. And then I've been really inspired by just creative and more sort of grassroots based activities like sort of the Vaccinate Fairhaven initiative, where a lot of organizers and volunteers came and vaccinated, I think, 4,000 Fairhaven residents during that campaign. So what does that look like for Collab? I think, you know, I'm really proud of our model of really, as Margaret mentioned, really co-creating a lot of our programs with our entrepreneurs, and our entrepreneurs really leading us in what programs they need and they want us to design, and being a part of the decision-making process with us about what programs are needed. And I think for us, we always have had two goals, which is how do we expand the amount of people and the amount of entrepreneurs we can serve, and how do we improve and deepen our supports for entrepreneurs. So those we always return back to those two goals, you know, for the past few years since we've been operating. I think, you know, in terms of expansion, you know, how do we become a welcoming space always for as many entrepreneurs? And improvements, I think, is interesting because, you know, Margaret had mentioned, you know, we always want to stay on sort of the cutting edge of business supports. There's sort of an endless amount of ways that we can provide really critical business supports. I think, you know, whether that's support on financial models, support on all the elements of a business plan. I think something that makes, I think ultimately our secret sauce, like why entrepreneurs, you know, leave our program saying, you know, not just that their idea is further, but that some part of being a part of a collab changed the way they think about themselves or changed their life, I think is what Margaret has brought up a few times about heart ethos. A quote that comes to mind from one of our entrepreneurs, I'll pull it up, is half the battle is emboldening entrepreneurs to believe in their idea. That was Della, who is the founder of an organization called Nestle. And I think one goal for us is how do we, you know, codify and improve our supports to support that emboldening, right? Of course, endless amounts of things we can do to support individuals in sort of the fundamental or logistical or technical assistance parts of their program, but what about those limiting beliefs that entrepreneurs face on this like thorny and tender and non-linear journey that is entrepreneurship? I know for me and Margaret, you know, I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur, right? I thought at first I didn't have any entrepreneurs in my family. That's actually wrong. My Korean grandfather in Korea was a rice and honey entrepreneur, and I found that out from my mom. But I think so much of the reason why I started Collab with Margaret is because people said you could. And how do we bake that into our programs is always going to be a continual goal for us.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Margaret, your thoughts on kind of goals for the organization or goals for New Haven generally?
Yeah, sure. In terms of goals for New Haven, I don't think I could have said it better than what Caroline just said. I think I totally agree with that. What comes to mind is, you know, a city that centers the voices of the people who live here, and that feels pretty simple to me. In terms of, and what I would add to sort of goals for the organization, again, agree with Caroline, is I would love to see Collab sort of really deeply embedded in this community in a way that it hasn't been in the past, getting to know this city in a different way, engaging with different neighborhoods. One of our coworkers, George Black, who was born and raised here in New Haven, really has this amazing way of talking about the city that inspired me to think about engagement at a sidewalk level. Can we really get to a sidewalk level and just get to know the city in a different way? Obviously, we've spent 10 years here, but there's so much more to learn, so many more people to meet. And can we, as an organization, build out the infrastructure and the heart to really have this effort belong to the community that we're trying to serve, and learn with them about what is needed and where this organization can go. So that's what I would add to what Caroline was saying about organizational goals.
Beautiful. Well, as we get close to the end, I thought we'd sort of end on a fun note. if an alum is coming back to New Haven for reunions or maybe this summer when things start to open up again, where should they go see? Patricia, maybe your favorite place or go see, or it could be a bike trip, it could be a cafe or a store or something that maybe we didn't know about or might not have been there. Kind of what's your favorite spots?
Well, there's always a lot to see in New Haven. I mean, there was something that was pretty phenomenal that I did not even know. It's over in Fairhaven, and it's the Black civil there's this Juneteenth ride that's happening with bikes. So it's part of International Arts and Ideas. And one of the stops on there is this memorial by the descendants of Blacks who fought in the Civil War. And it's this incredible piece that you go up to and you look at, and it tells you a little bit about, that Connecticut had this incredible presence of Black citizens who fought in the Civil War. And there are something like 8 slabs. And on each one of these slabs are names of individuals who fought in the Civil War to, pretty much help us to free Blacks. And this monument was paid for and commissioned by the descendants of these Civil War Black individuals. But what was really fascinating is practically every town had several names listed. And what that really did for me was to really think about all the history that I've read, and particularly as we think about the racial injustice in this country, and how Black individuals were brought here in shackles. It really made me proud that Connecticut was a safe harbor for Black Americans who were trying to figure out, how can we get rid of this awful thing that was part of our country. And it just made me really proud to, be in Connecticut, to know that I came back to New Haven, to know that this memorial sits right here in New Haven. I've never seen it before. So it's definitely something that would be very moving, joyous. It gave me joy. I just was speechless.
Can you walk to? I'm gonna have to get the link for this when we share it.
Yes, I will. I will
Send
it to you.
Okay, perfect.
I don't know if I can locate it, but it's located right in Fairhaven. Like when you go down Chapel Street, you just keep going, and then you go over the bridge, and there's a park right there. And that memorial sits right there. It'll just take your breath away.
To identify it, circle it on a map or something. So can you walk there, or is it bikeable from?
No, it's probably a bike ride down Chapel.
Okay.
Yeah, going towards Fairhaven. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Margaret, what would you recommend people see?
So my mind immediately went to food, and I know New Haven is very well known for pizza. So obviously get pizza, but my recommendation, especially if it's warm outside, is to get pizza to go and take it to Worcester Square Park. Bring a blanket, sit, get some drinks, stay there with your friends or family for an hour or so, and just kind of enjoy being in that park. It's a beautiful park, and the pizza just tastes better when you're out there. Also, just want to shout out some cool restaurants. I don't know if folks haven't been in New Haven in a long time. Pizza is really great, but also lots of other stuff. If you love sushi, check out Otaru downtown, my favorite sushi restaurant maybe in the world. There's a new Mexican restaurant called Camacho Garage in Westville. Very, very good. September in Bangkok is like this very innovative Thai restaurant on State Street. Check that out if you haven't. And the last one that comes to mind is Mezcal, which is another Mexican restaurant in Upper State Street. So if folks are in town, definitely check out some non-pizza options as well.
And we can get on a bike and burn off all that food by biking over to the memorial to see it the next day. I love it. This is great because I think people are really excited, and I know I would otherwise be on campus next weekend for reunions, but we can't be there. So I think things are kind of building up when we get back there. Caroline, what would you add?
Yeah, both Margaret and Patricia's answers resonate with me, and I'll pick and choose a bit of both. Totally agree with Margaret about restaurants. I'd plug a couple Collab graduates as well to the mix. So one is Havenly Treats, which I think has maybe been on this series before.
Yes.
Yes, they're amazing. They graduated from Collab, one of the first handful of cohorts, and they're based on Temple Street, right across from Bowtie Cinema. They're a social enterprise, so they have a program where they a fellowship program that employs immigrants and refugee chefs, and produce delicious Middle Eastern cuisine and food. And then they also have a model where they're organizing their fellows for housing justice and other sort of collective community-based issues. I think they're just a tremendous organization and delicious food. And then Patricia, you named the park that is one of my favorite parks in New Haven, Criscola Park. I can't describe.
Yes, it is in Criscola Park.
Yes, it's my favorite because of that memorial. I couldn't describe it more beautifully than you did, Patricia. A couple other things about that park. It is, I just think, one of the most beautiful parks in New Haven. You see the Q Bridge, which is this award-winning bridge, and it's right alongside the river. It has these huge basketball courts that just make you feel really epic while you're playing, and there's always people who are willing to play with you in the basketball courts, and I love playing pickup basketball. And it's just a beautiful park that's so full of activity, especially every single day in the summer. It's just one of my favorite places in the world, for all those reasons and the reason that Patricia described.
That's excellent. Well, thank you. We'll make sure we get a list of all those and links, and we'll share it out later. So we're at the end of our time. I wanted to say thank you very much for doing the work that you all do. I hope we can see you in person in the near future. Keep us posted. By the way, we used Havenly Treats to be one of our little gift incentives for the YANA Gala. So we're always looking for ways. I'd rather hire someone who came out of Collab or a student who came out of New Haven Promise to be an intern with us or to provide us with something, because it kind of goes full circle. And those would be my first choices. So keep us posted on businesses, investment opportunities, whatever we can do to kind of help share all that goodwill you've been building on there. So thank you again. I've gotten some lovely comments I can see popping up that people are saying thank you for the work that you guys are doing in New Haven. Good luck, and we'll continue to work with you all and to hear how things are going in the future. So hopefully see you all in person in New Haven in not the too distant future. So
great.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.